Welcome back to episode 57 of the Grappling Growth podcast with me, Joe Testori. On today's episode, I was joined by Michael, who is the founder of MJH Art Studios. Mike has worked in the marketing industry for over 30 years. He's worked with clients such as BT, and he talks about the experience of how back in the 80s, he was literally drawing illustrations on a piece of paper and doing business in a pub. That's how old school we go in this podcast. He also talks about his experience training for 6 months massively intently as a bodybuilder. He also talks about where he ranked in that competition that he did and the mindset he had to adopt to become a bodybuilder for 6 months at the age of 58, which is so impressive. And he's actually made me just think about how I can level up myself and just commit to what I'm doing. He talks about having an unrelenting dedication and giving 100% to whatever you do. This kind of became a bit of a coaching session for me. He gave me tons of advice on what I can do as a man, an adult, and how to just better navigate life. So I'd recommend this podcast to any young men who maybe need a bit of a guiding compass from people who have that bit of age and experience on them. If you enjoy this podcast, maybe share it to a friend. Take care. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Mike, pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm all right, Joe. Thank you so much for the invite. No, I'm good. It's Friday, so which is all good.
Most welcome. Mike,
yes.
What does growth look like to you?
It's a really good question. It's something I've been kind of thinking about. I think it works in a few ways. There's obviously growth in the business, but I think for me it's growth in yourself and actually how you tackle challenges, and and especially being when you start a new business, there's always challenges that come. So you're always growing, you're always learning and things. So for me, growth is yourself as much as anything else. Yeah, growth in business is important, but you've got to grow yourself, and especially when you go into new sectors and new challenges, it's all about how you can cope with those and learn from others, especially.
Taking a step back, if you were to talk a little bit more about yourself there, you told me some really interesting stuff about bodybuilding last year. So if you were to look at the growth arc that you had over the 6 months of training and then competing, what word would you use to describe that experience?
I think experience is a good one. The actual word experience is good because, and also with not doing it like before, it was kind of unknown as well. So there's a lot of things that you don't know you're going into. You're sort of told about these things, but actually the whole process you go through, you are, pretty much going into the unknown for something like this.
Would you say to, as you called her, Mrs. H?
Mrs. H, yes.
Would you say you became a little bit, do you think you became a bit annoying towards her in the sense of like, oh, all you're doing is talking about bodybuilding and tracking your macros and weighing food and these things?
Well, actually, no, because Mrs. H kind of embraced it a bit. Apart from spitting a coffee across the floor when I told her I was doing it, because she was like, "You doing what?" We had this sort of. It was quite funny, really, because I got asked to do this thing, and I just went out and said, "Look, I've been asked to do some bodybuilding." And literally, I've never heard a laugh so loudly and with a mouthful of coffee. It was so funny. But then, to be fair to her, Sharon had been working with the same nutritionist that I work with, so actually, it became a bit of a challenge. How can we stick to the diet but actually make it interesting? So she got fully behind it, and I wasn't too, there was a few bits where, oh god, we've got to fit another bowl of yogurt in, or we've got to go and do this, and our lifestyle was kind of restricted a little bit because we couldn't go out for a coffee, we couldn't go out and eat anywhere, everything had to be done and measured wherever we went. But to be fair, I couldn't have done it without her. She really embraced it. We've been married the next couple of weeks, we've been married 35 years. So actually, she thank you. It's a bit like a double life sentence, but she gets the whole. She got the whole process and was really behind me. She was making sure we had the right food in, so I didn't have to worry about that. We batch cooked a lot of food, so actually, it was a real team effort. I just did the bit studying on the stage, but I couldn't have done it without her.
And so you spoke about experience and her being kind of the rock there to make sure. Imagine she's been there in the relationship. So it's I guess she was just taking a natural place in everything. So that's really cool.
Yeah,
And looking at the experience, you mentioned to me that like you did it. They asked you, do you want to do another show, and you said
yeah.
no. Do you have anything else now that you've set your sights on?
Well, funny enough, I was with the guy, one of the PTs who helped me this morning, and I told him that actually I'm signing up for a 10K run, and he just said, "Oh, mate, that'll be a piece of cake compared to what you've just done." So that's the next thing for me. I'm just going to do a 10K for the charity I'm a trustee of, that's coming up in October. But other than that, no, the thoughts of going back on stage again and doing the bodybuilding, they're talking about me maybe doing over 60s, but I will have to seriously consider it whether I want to do it, just because of what it puts you through.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you kind of done it. And when I was doing all this, one of the things he told me was there's only sort of 5 to 6% of people will actually go through and do it. A lot of them quit. So actually getting through was a major achievement. So, I'm happy with what I've done. I've got to want to do it and not do it to please anyone else. It'd be easy for me to say, oh yeah, I'll do it because they want me to do it. But I knowing what I know now, I have to really consider whether I should do it again.
What do you think internally led you to really commit yourself and want to do it? Because you just said that 94% of people, 95% of people do not do it because they probably look at it, think of the idea,
Yeah,
think, I'll do that. But then, so that's a small cohort.
it is, and part of this was I do like a bit of a challenge. I use the word bit of a challenge there because it turned out to be more than a bit of a challenge. But once I'd started doing it, and obviously I had to pay for things, so it's not the cheapest thing in the world to do because you're paying for the expertise around you to support you. So that's your PT, your nutritionist, you have a posing coach, there's various things. But my mindset was that if I cheated a little bit on the way, I'd be cheating myself, I'd be cheating everyone else. So I was determined that actually I would do everything I possibly could do to stick to what they told me to do. Then I could get on stage, be the best I could possibly be. I might not be better than anyone else, I might be bigger than anyone else, but I know I'd done 110% to get where I was. And I could state there and say, you know what, I've done everything I physically can do. And my coach said to me, the one of them said, look, you can control what you can control. Everything else you can't. So whoever turns up on stage, I've no idea who I'm up against. I've no idea who's going to walk through the door. But as long as I can be the best I can be, then I've done everything I can, and that's what kept me going. And the little changes, the incremental changes of food and changes in the training, what I did, what I was lifting, what I was doing. It's all these incremental changes like we talked about yesterday. There's things that you do that just make little changes, make the difference, and that's what I had to do.
And how did you fare in the competition?
I came second in my group, and I moved to what they call the athletic class. So it wasn't so much about the bulk. Originally, the plan was for me to go to the seniors section because of my age. But then once I started losing the weight, it soon became clear that I was never going to compete at that, with the bulk on it. But actually, from the structure, my muscles and everything else, then I could fit in the athletic class, which was great. Which means I didn't have to wear skimpy, tighty whities, which was a real blessing.
So, I mean, I'm not familiar with it. I've never had an interest in bodybuilding. I've got a few friends who have done a few bodybuilding shows, and similar to what you said, I know it's not really a friend, he's just a guy who I'm very cool with. But he did one years ago, and he was talking to one of my mates, and he said, I will never do it again. I think he did two. And he's like, no, it's just, I think he cut from 90 odd kilos to 70, 71.
Yeah.
Which he was like, no.
It's insane. I lost 2 stone in weight. And, the problem was none of my clothes fit me. I was nothing fit. It was ridiculous. Everyone's going, oh, you look ill. But I think I never set out to do any of this stuff. My sport, as I told you, is badminton, and I run and things like that. But when they saw me in the gym doing what I could do, that's when they sort of said, have you ever thought about it? Which I thought was a joke at first, but turned out to be quite serious.
What were you doing in the gym that they picked out, do you think?
It's a bit of a long story, but I dislocated my elbow. I don't know how I did it, but I did. And they said, oh, go down to see the physio at this local gym. So I did. And they sort of said, do a bit of rehab on, the weights and things like that. So I just thought, yeah, fair enough, I'll do a bit. And we started working on some cardio as well, because they knew I played badminton. So we did a bit of that. And the training just got better and better, and I just felt better and more about it. And one of the guys who was down the gym was actually a world champion in the natural bodybuilding world. Bit older than I am, so I think he's about 60. He's won it. But he said, yeah, you said, we've seen what you can do, we've seen what you look like. Had you thought about it? And it was just like a moment to think, no, I hadn't thought about it. Because you say you go down the gym and you see everyone lifting all the big weights and they're all bigger than you and everything else. And you do get that kind of, hang on, I feel a bit inferior. But once you get to know everyone down there, as you said before, it's not about how heavy the weights are. It's whether you're doing it right and you're doing the right reps and everything else to get the effect that you want to get. So actually, once you understand it and talk to the right people, then suddenly you think, actually, yeah, it does become achievable. And that's when the challenge. So I'd been training for 4 or 5 years, and it was this time last year that I started seriously with the diet. But it was probably 12 months prior to that the idea was seeded. Okay. So it wasn't we'll start next week kind of thing. It was wait for the dates to come out. Once we have a date, it's like anything. Once you have a date or a deadline, they're not going to move the show for me. Then you work backwards on the 24 week program, 6 months worth to really get to the end goal. And that was it.
You become laser focused on target, and then kind of as what you were saying yesterday, it's like your life then becomes this thing that you're working towards typically. And I've tried not to become the persona or character of I'm like running an ultra marathon, but it is what pretty much consumes your mind. Like you think about it multiple times a day. You're like, okay, I've got this thing here that I'm working towards. And I remember I had a few Muay Thai fights and jiu-jitsu competition, and the lead up to it, the 2 weeks out, it's just like, okay, this Saturday I'm doing this. I'm getting the ring, but I find that, and I'd be really curious to know your perspective on it.
Yeah.
But I found that when I was everything else around it, work-wise, I became more focused and more lasered in home, because I felt that I didn't want to waste time, because I know I've got something after work immediately that I'm going to have to really work towards.
Yeah. 100%. I totally agree with that, because it's not only you go down the gym and train the weights, that's the easy bit. When they say you've got to get 12,000 steps a day in, and you've got to do an hour's cardio, and you're training 4 times a week, but your cardio is every day, your steps are every day, that takes time. So I'm an hour on the bike, out with a walk. So fortunately, this is what, working, when Sharon came home from school, when she was working, we'd go out for a walk around the park. That's my steps done. But suddenly, when you fit all these things into your diary and you're eating 4 times a day, and you've got to eat 90 minutes before you train, then suddenly your time to physically work on the business, doing the stuff, the art, or whatever we do, it becomes very small. So you have to really focus down on doing it. And interestingly, when I'd finished the competition, that's where I started to struggle a little bit, because my for 6 months I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do this. It's blocked out everything. And then when that isn't the norm or the necessity, you suddenly miss that kind of structure a little bit. So actually making sure that I'm still managing to get my time to, go and get my steps in now. I'm not as regimented as probably I could be. But it does become something as serious as, I'd train for 6 months. These guys train for, if you look at Olympians and things like that, they're training for 4 years for maybe 10 minutes. I train for 6 months for, effectively 10 minutes on stage. But yeah, you're right. It does focus the mind. But equally, it can also drain your mind. So the last 2 weeks of training, I basically took off work because I couldn't concentrate. I drove into the back of somebody, because you literally you've got nothing. And they did warn me. They said this will be really painful, but it'll be really bad. And I'm going, hey, it's fine. And then it hits you when you've got no energy, your body fat's gone, and you're just at the point where actually, I don't know what day it is, and you're supping that much water. You're on the loo and all sorts of things. So yeah, it's a real. I'm glad I've done it. Don't get me wrong, and you learn a lot. But it's been really challenging, but good.
So I've just searched it now as well in the background. But I remember looking into this a while ago. I heard it before, but it was Tyson Fury. He was talking about his feelings after fights, and you're probably aware of historic times whereby he's won fights and was undefeated up until back end of last year. But for him, he would he would have these fights and then he'd go on binges. He would go out drinking, cocaine,
Yeah.
stuff like this. But just reading into it, I thought it was called emotional dip, but that's what the concept is. But so it's called a post-competition blues or post-event breakdown.
Yeah.
Essentially, it looks at describing the emotional dip athletes and performers experience after the height of preparing for a particular event. It says the most technical use is post-adrenaline crash, post-achievement depression. Some also refer to it as the emotional dip. So that's what it's talking about there. But and I've felt before, it's typically if I've only trained for about 4 or 5 different events, but you finish the event on, say, the Saturday or the Sunday, and you've got this euphoric feeling. You go to
Absolutely, yeah.
Restaurant, you have a great meal, you eat well, you feel really proud. The next day is fine as well. I always find, and this is as an entrepreneur too, it's the days, the Tuesdays, the Wednesday afternoons where you're by yourself. There's no one else around. You're just there with your thoughts, and you're just looking around. And you're like, actually, I'm not feeling too great here. And it's kind of, I suppose that's where, when you look at dopamine and extreme highs, it will equally match with extreme lows, and it's like peaks and troughs. So if we stay in a constant state of serotonin where we're just level, then we will stay level. But when you're preparing for an event like this, you've put so much emotion. You're maybe like the metaphysics of your body so attached, involved into this journey, because it's an experience, as you said. So
it's 100%. It's a journey, yeah. And you're dead right. You do kind of dip afterwards a little bit because you've got the buzz of doing it all, and then it's like, what do I do now? Kind of approach. That's why carrying on at the gym is so important. But funny enough, I was on a bit of a networking chat with a guy I've known for a long time, and we were talking of exactly what you were saying about the highs and lows of business. Some minutes you're up here. It's a bit like when you win a client pitch, isn't it? You're absolutely buzzing. It's fantastic. Or you're putting a proposal in and you've done the best you can do. You're really excited. And then you have the lows of it. Either they've ghosted you or they've not come back to you, and you try not to take it personally. But he said to me, he said, well, look, mate, he said, you need the lows to appreciate the highs. And it's so true. And I think we just, we have to sort of embrace those moments of when things are going really well, but actually realize that actually sometimes you can remember the good bits to drag you through the bits that aren't so tough.
Yeah, massively so. And it's I find that the more seasoned and experienced you get as an entrepreneur, you realize that there's going to be more difficult times than amazing times. And this is one thing I've really tried to work on, is that when something good does happen, I do take a time to reflect, take a step back and appreciate the win, but not get overhyped where it's like, yeah, that's it, and I'm going to take my foot off the gas, because I've been there before, where you turn around the pitch and you think that's the work done, but it's sort of like they say as a Navy SEAL or Marine, that doing buds to actually get in to become a SEAL, everyone thinks that's the hard bit. The hard bit is when you actually start. And I know a few Marines, fortunately,
right?
And they just tell you how much consistent, relentless work is. And then eventually, a few years in, it might get to a point where, touch wood, there isn't a war going on. So their days pretty much consist of just going to the gym twice a day, lifting. I spent a week with a friend who's a former Marine here in Brazil, and he was telling me loads of things. It's like, I just left because it got quite boring. I wasn't doing anything. I signed up because I wanted to test myself, and I'm just testing myself in the gym. So what am I getting from this?
Yeah, I think the highs and the lows, you say, this is what keeps us going. But I think also you've got to. I think the word you used there was being consistent, and I think that's the key in anything, whether it's you're prospecting or doing whatever it is. It's just about trying to be consistent and keeping those conversations going. That's what I find as well, and you do get things that are setbacks. You look back over the nearly 40 years I've been working, you always get things that happen, but at the same time, equally, opportunities come along. it's embracing the opportunities, but also reflecting on things that maybe didn't work so well. Why didn't they work? What could we have done better? There's loads in hindsight. It's a wonderful thing. You can look back and think. I mean, I can think of many situations I've been in now where I think actually I would have done things differently. But I think you've got to own that and realize that yourself and not try and gloss over it. And I guess some of that comes with experience of seeing different things and seeing technology change over the past 30, 40 years. Makes a difference to how we work.
Yeah, there's I learned this from Andrew Huberman before, and he was talking about David Goggins. So he spoke about a part of the brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Are you familiar with it?
No, I know a little bit about. I should know. My daughter's done a master's in psychology, but but I know there's various forward bits and lobes and various things like that. Yeah, but I couldn't remember the names for the life of me at the minute.
Yeah, the AMCC. But it was he was talking about the part of the brain. And essentially, he said they looked at someone like Goggins, but when you see people who train incessantly and they're consistent, essentially this part of the brain illuminates, it expands. So the more you do stuff that's hard, the more you lean into chosen suffering, the easier things become. And you probably experienced this yourself, I have, but it's a case of probably leading up to the competition, you're probably training 5-6 days a week, and it was just a case of it felt relentless, but it didn't feel hard because you just got into a routine. It was like walking the dog, brushing your teeth. And what it's suggesting is that the more you do something hard and the fitter you are, the more this expands. And then it used the kind of the counter of people who are lazy or overweight. Their anterior mid-cingulate cortex is smaller in their brain because they're not working it. So it's sort of like a muscle that the more you work the muscle, the bigger it gets, and then the easier it is to lift up this can here. Whereas if you haven't worked the muscle, if you picked up something that you're not familiar with, it's like a baby. A baby can't pick up this can because
those
muscles, and it can't stand on its feet. But the more it puts pressure on its feet, then it's able to stand.
Yeah, well, they do say that, part of what we do with the art stuff as well is exercising the brain. It is exercising in a slightly different way. But yeah, you're right. It is about, doing the things. And I think with anything, it's the more you can challenge yourself. I mean, there's many things I've looked back now and think, actually, how do we even do that? For some of the clients I've worked with in the past, they're giving you a problem. The answer's always been, yeah, of course we can do it. We'll sort it out. And you always find a way. There's always something about solving a puzzle, solving a challenge, because you don't want to lose the opportunity. You think, we'll get away around it somehow. And that's what you do. But I think you're either wired that way or you're not, to want to help solving problems and help people out. And I think that's one thing I've always tried to do. Something that, my dad always instilled me, about you always work the right way and try and find a solution to something.
Yeah, that's great wisdom. So talking about wisdom, we spoke about this on the same age as your youngest daughter.
Yes, you are, which made me feel really, really old.
No. What advice would you give to 20-year-old Mike or 20-year-old listening to this?
I was thinking about this, and I think what I would be saying is take the opportunities that come to you. Definitely, it's take the opportunity and get uncomfortable with, get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Do things out of your comfort zone, push yourself, and if an opportunity comes along, take it. What's the worst thing that can happen? I think looking back now, there's things I would have done differently back in the day if opportunities, when opportunities approach themselves to do different things. And I think now, yeah, it would be definitely, it's what I've said to my kids. If something happens, you've got an opportunity, take it, do it. Whether that's traveling abroad or whatever that might be in your job. If someone asks you to do something, you do it. Do it to your best of ability. Do it more than anyone else. And I think that's it. And I've said that too. I do work with Young Enterprise as well. So you've seen Young Enterprise. So I'm a business advisor for Young Enterprise. And again, we're working with those kids. It's about pushing, push themselves outside your comfort zone. Take opportunities to do things. You don't want to just kind of lull along. So that would be my advice to my younger self, is just go for it. Push yourself. Take advantage of things.
I think that's really apt advice. And I work with young entrepreneurs as well, probably not to the same extent or degree as you, but I think it's not even young people, but it's the fear among so many people of what if this fails? So what if it fails? You learn
Yeah,
a lesson, you try it, and most doors are revolving doors whereby you go through them, doesn't work out, you go back through, you try something else, and I think there's this massive uh, fear of judgment from others, but and I was on a call today and talking to someone they're trying a new business venture. I just and everything 90% of the things, the problems are within their heads. And I was
yeah,
like, think about throwing spaghetti at a wall. You can throw spaghetti at all the walls in your house, but if no one comes in your house, no one will ever know that you've got
yeah,
spaghetti throughout your house. Only you will, and yeah, I mean, no one wants that on their walls. But the
no,
point I'm making is that you can make these tests, you can do a lot of these things in private, in silent, without having to publicize it and have the fear of judgment. And I think that's something I had to overcome, where I thought, I don't really care. And then you start doing the things that are outwards facing, like posting content on LinkedIn, like we both do, where you're like, actually, I don't give a shit if you think this video is cringe. You're
yeah.
not paying my bills and my mortgage, so I couldn't care less.
And I think one of the things that I was very much in my young, when I was, yeah, I mean, I've got great admiration for what you're doing. It's brilliant. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I mean, I was thinking back to when I was 22. I was like, just come out of college, thinking about getting married. It's crazy, really, when I look back now. Hopefully, Mrs. H won't listen to this. But one of the things that, and I think this kind of stems back from your childhood a little bit. And I know this is kind of fact. There's sometimes how you are around about the 7, 8 year old is what shapes you for how you're feeling emotionally. So I can really recollect a lot of negatives, that not negative in a nasty way, but oh, we don't want to do this, maybe not try that. And so I've always been quite half empty glass. And it's only
From
of
7,
late.
8 years old, you're saying?
Sorry, again, say again.
From 7, 8 years old.
7 year olds, I think it sort of triggers and sets you up as to how you are emotionally, when you get older with various things. But when I look back, I've always been kind of glass half full.
Why do you think that is?
I just think it's because of maybe things that happened, with my, I guess things around not necessarily wanting to go out and do things that are a bit more different and a bit more challenging, a bit samey kind of thing, comfortable, if that makes sense. Whereas actually now I'm more, what if this could work really well? So actually now I've completely transposed into, oh, come on, let's go and do this. Let's try this. This could work. And actually that fear of something failing is like, well, whatever. What's the worst thing that can happen? So I think it's a bit of a shift of a mindset, but I think that's where actually having the right people around you as a team who are very positive people rubs off on you. So over the past certainly for the past 7, 8 years, I've had some really good people around me, business partners I've had when I had the marketing business, all positive, and that just rubs off. So all that gains positivity and helps you with your own mindset when it comes to thinking of new things that happen. We're looking at doing workshops, stuff that we wouldn't have thought of doing before, but actually, yeah, why can't we do it? Other people do it. Why shouldn't we be able to do these kind of things? So I think it's definitely, a mindset thing.
So, really, really fascinating. A question on that. I guess this is quite a personal, selfish question. As someone who has their own agency, and I've had lots of ups and downs. I've had to essentially get rid of my team that was based in the UK, and now I've got a remote team all throughout the globe, essentially because of economic conditions, the economic impact. And I think more people make those changes than they let on to, and it's kind of it's like, well, I've had to take a few steps back. And compared to where my business was in 2021, 2022, I'm not at the level where I was there before. And I think that's the truth of business, that you have a lot of turmoil and ups and downs. And I think there's those layers of doubt. My question to you is kind of a loading question. A, how important, I mean, I kind of know the answer to it. How important is it to have the right team around you? And B, what are the traits that you look for in people to create that team and that environment to grow the business effectively?
So, yeah, without the right people around you, it'd be so difficult. So that might be my accountant. I've got a great networking team that I go to. So we have our own peer board that's around there, and there's entrepreneurs in there as well. And so having those people around you key, and it can be trusted friends, people that you can talk to open and honestly, and they're going to tell you that the baby's ugly if there's a problem, which is what you want. No one likes telling anyone the baby's ugly, but sometimes you have to, and that's really important. And I have to be able to gel with the people I get on with. I have to be able to gel with them and get with them, but at the same time, as long as they're honest with me, I can normally judge a character pretty quick as to whether I can get on with them or not. And there'll be certain things that I can either think, whether it's their sense of humor, whatever it is. Sometimes when you meet people, you can just click. In fact, I was chatting to this with my copywriter this morning because we were doing a bit of video. She doesn't want to do any video at all, and I've persuaded her to say, "Look, you really need to try it." But we just click and we can just help each other. So for me, it's very much a personality thing. But they've obviously got to be good at what they do. I can pick the nicest person in the world, but if they're a crap accountant, it doesn't help. So it just takes a little bit of time to get to know those people. But once you know them, they're like, they just feel right. I think that's the best way I can describe it. I think some of this is going with the old gut feeling. I can pretty well judge people when I've met them as to whether I think I can get on with them or not. And that for me is the most important bit. But yeah, having the right people in the different sectors is kind of key.
I think, and thank you for that advice. I've always tried to look at competence is, in my view, one of the easiest things to hire for. You have someone who has the degree, has the credentials, ticks all these boxes, has this experience, great. But fundamentally, if they're a dickhead to work with, then work with those people. And I've had those people, and you can feel the toxicity that they produce within the team, the organization, how they are, even how they talk to clients. It's like they're on a high horse, they've got a chip on their shoulder, and you think, hang on a minute.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we did an interesting exercise, actually, a previous company before I had the marketing business. I worked for a company for 30 years, but we did a whole disc profiling. And that was the first time we'd really even thought about doing it, but it was so interesting to understand. And that really helps, understanding why people think about how they act as they do.
Mm-hmm.
And some people do it because of the way they're made up, and you've got the different colours that kind of react with each other, but you also learn how to deal with those people. So that was a really interesting exercise. So you can almost, when you meet new people now, you can sort of think, I know where you are on this and what you expect. So you can actually gear your answers up to suit what they're like, if that makes sense. So I think really understanding someone's personality, and the other big thing as well is, have they got the same values as us? That's really important. The honesty and integrity and all those kind of things that, we see in ourselves, that, I want to work with people who've got the same values. It just makes the conversations easier. It makes working together so much easier as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know it's a whole subject on, I can talk to my daughter for hours about this stuff because, with a degree, a master's in psychology, it's, what she talks about and how you interact with people is so fascinating.
So the disc personality model, there was a book that I read called Surrounded by Idiots by,
right,
I think he's a Danish guy, Thomas Eriksson.
Right.
So he talks about the four primary colors: red, yellow, green, and blue, and then essentially so he calls all of them idiots, and how to talk to those people in their language, and how you communicate. And what I realized is, I identified my color, or the mix of colors, and I thought, okay, well, and then I started clicking. I was like, I work really well with those people and those people. I don't work well with those people.
Yeah.
Why? And I was like, it's not that we don't get along. It's that I'm speaking English, you're speaking Spanish, they're speaking Korean, and they're speaking Mandarin. And that's the issue. It's not even an issue when you figure that out. It's like, if you had four people that are speaking all of those languages on a table, how would you figure that out? You'd figure out who can. Maybe the guy who speaks Mandarin, they'd be able to communicate with the person who speaks Korean, English to Spanish, and then you'd figure out how to work it around. And I think it really, that book really helped me change my view on how I looked at things that I thought were problems, or thought this guy is an arse or whatever. And it's like, some people are, they just
some people,
those people.
You can't do anything about that, unfortunately.
And then you realise, actually, this guy or girl is just I misunderstand them. And fundamentally, as humans, we want to be understood. We want to be able
Yeah.
to sit down and speak the same language and say, oh, actually, I get your viewpoint. And I've had podcasts as well where I'm not clicking with the guest and I'm struggling to communicate with them. And I've tried to take this reframe and think, I'm just not speaking their language.
Yeah. No, I kind of get that. I mean, one of the other things that I try and do a lot of as well, if there's anything that goes on, is actually trying to see both sides of the, there's always two sides to any coin of anything that comes through, whether it's a challenge or whatever. There's always two sides to things. And I always feel one of the things I can be quite good is looking at both sides, and see, kind of understanding the objective view, or actually there is a challenge around this, but actually if you look at it from someone else's perspective, I can see exactly where you're coming from. It's I think dealing with people, it's an interesting one.
It's probably one of the most exciting elements of business that I enjoy. I remember a few years ago, I had a client, really good client of mine at the time. He sent me a message saying, "Look, done. Don't want to work with you guys anymore." I was like, we've just done this really cool project together. So, anyways, I remember it was 3 years ago, and I had one of my team members who was in the room, and he listened to the whole conversation. But we jumped on this call, and I said, "Look, I'm not trying to argue or anything. I just want to understand your perspective. So just tell me every problem." And I just wrote down 8 of these problems that he had, and I was really proud of myself when I got off the call. But we went through all of these 8 problems, and we just kind of addressed them. And I saw them if they were honest mistakes on our part, or if I saw them as miscommunications or things that I genuinely thought were his responsibility. What I loved about him, he could turn around and say, "Look, I know I'm not the easiest to work with. I'm a bit delayed. I take my time with this. This happens, so on and so forth." So I went through all of these points, and you could see he just went from like being like this to, and he said to me, he's like, "Oh, what? Fair enough. You've taken full accountability. You've told me the plan. We actually made a hire, which I thought was really clever. We made a hire the month before any of this arose." And I said, "Look, I've hired this guy as a foreshadow because I know that these are potential pain points amongst your businesses, the clients that we're working with. So we've hired this guy. Just give me the grace of a month, and then that was it. The relationship to a new level." And I think a lot of it just comes from, instead of just saying, "Well, no, it's your problem," or not taking accountability, or just seeing it as black and white, convergent. If you turn around and you can see it divergent and say, "Actually, you've got some really good points there," and I didn't see that you mentioned, and I think that's why client and customer feedback is so imperative.
Oh yeah, you can. I mean, I put ISO systems in previously, and part of that process is you have to get customer feedback. And I remember getting some feedback through, and it was just like, "This is wrong, and whatever." And he was like, "Oh my God!" So actually, I'm straight on the phone. "I've seen your feedback," and then all of a sudden they go, "Oh no, it wasn't really that bad. It was fine, honestly." But I think you have to own something, and if there's an issue, it's finding out why it went wrong. Things happen, things go wrong. We've done all sorts of stuff where things haven't gone according to plan, and the customers said this hasn't gone right. But actually, if you say, "Okay, tell us what went wrong, but more importantly, how can we make sure it doesn't happen again?" And actually, you put processes in place to stop things happening, and that's your corrective action or whatever you want to call it. But it is about learning from the mistake, but more importantly, own the darn thing. That's key. And that was something else my dad said to me. He said, "The man who don't make a mistake doesn't get anywhere." That has stuck with me forever. So you can't be afraid to make these things, but as you say, if someone's not happy about it, it's understanding why. And equally, if you can pinpoint, as you've just done, alluded to, if you can pinpoint them down, and actually sometimes the client doesn't see it, they're just too busy focused on, "Oh, this has gone wrong, but why?" But actually they might have been part of the problem. But it's how you can work that out, and often or not, you can make more out of solving a problem than anything. And they still stick with you as being fans of the business because you've sorted something out the way you did it.
I also think it gets you to a higher level with that client, because if you're willing, especially in a small, nimble business, if you can, as the founder, call them up and be like, "Oh my God, saw your feedback. What was the issue here? I really want to address this." It's not you haven't got a 22-year-old internal assistant who's taking that call. It's you
Yeah.
the founder, the director, the managing director, coming on that call and saying, "Hey, I've seen this feedback. It's really important to me. What's the issue? How can we make your experience better?"
Yeah.
I feel I've retained and kept a lot of business over the years, just from, and I wouldn't be able to do that with a 100-person company and accounts that I don't manage. But luckily, I'm not at that level, so I use that to my advantage, where I can get feedback from people and saying, "Hey, what's the issue here?" Or if we could improve one thing with regards to your experience with us, what would it
Yeah.
be? That they might say to you, "We just want a report every week that goes over this and this." And I'm like, I could do that in 10 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not a problem. If that's going to increase your lifetime value and retain you as a client for the next year, then it's worth it's the give
Yeah.
and take.
It is, yeah. I mean, in the past, I've done quite a bit of kind of customer journey mapping as well. So we look at the customer experience and we take through from an order what happens. And, one of the key things you can do with your clients is have a review with them every quarter or whatever. And that's fine. But actually, how about asking the client when they want the review? Just because you want to get there in front of them every quarter, it might not be suitable for them. They might be saying, "Oh, just once a month, whatever." Do you want to be, I mean, now, simplest thing is to ask, how do you want to be communicated to? Do you want WhatsApp? Do you want an email? But make it about them. So they're having the choice. And then you can always say, "Well, actually, you wanted this. You wanted only a review once every such and such." But engaging them in part of the process and understanding their wants and needs is so important. And then going, "Yeah, actually, okay, we'll work with you on that." So, the whole customer experience and retention piece, is massive. It's just how you deal with it. And everyone's going to be different. One size doesn't fit all. Clients have got different nuances, and I think one of the things that I sometimes find a bit more frustrating nowadays is everything's done by email, or there's not as much personal interaction maybe as there could be. And I'm looking back to the days when I first started working, when obviously you didn't have a mobile phone, it didn't exist. We were very fortunate that through a conversation in a pub, we ended up doing work for BT and BT Mobile. So we actually ended up writing user guides for mobile phones when they first came out. I illustrated them and someone else wrote them.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm talking back in, this would be late 88, 89, conversation in the pub. They had a problem. We've got no one to do them. Who can do them? And my boss went, "Yeah, we'll do it." And that's how we ended up working then through BT Mobile. BT Mobile became Cellnet, BT Cellnet, which then merged into become O2. So we were involved in the welcome process, with letters sending out and all sorts of things. So you learn an awful lot of those processes. But right at the start of that, obviously the communication was key. So there's a lot of in-person stuff. Whereas now I find, maybe it's just me getting out, and it's just a personal thing for me. I would rather talk to someone on the phone, have a chat with them, meet up with them for a coffee, because I can see face to face with them, what's happening. And I think that's where some of the things could be improved personally. We all jump on Zoom and Teams and things like that. I mean, you and I do it, and it's fine. But I think, meeting someone face to face and picking the phone up and having a conversation with someone still works really, really well. But that's just the way, that I've always done things.
How do you strike the balance between, because you come from the old school mentality, which I really try to adopt. And my dad, he doesn't do well with tech. He's always like, and he's going to pick you up. Yeah, I'm going to pick you up this time. I'm like, could you not text me, please? Just tell me 7 o'clock. Instead, it's like, how you doing? Good. Yeah. What's up? You okay? Yeah. I'm going to pick. Okay, fine. I'm just in between this, and it's like, the only time I'll ignore him or just put him on, I'll be like, "Dad, look, I'm in a meeting." Like, sorry. It's like, you could have just texted me. But anyways, the question I was going to ask is, you how do you think it adapts with a lot of young people? They focus on the word scale with their business. So they think, oh, meeting up for coffees and doing the unscalable, we're not scale. I disagree. I think when you're starting your business, grassroots to foundations, do the unscalable stuff that isn't really sexy. It's sitting down, going out to meet clients and building that rapport, that relationship. How do you strike the balance between scaling a business and then doing the things that are unscalable?
Well, it's knowing who you want to talk to first, so understanding your customer and who the right people are, and potentially who the right people can help you. And I think it's just making an educated guess. I mean, you're not going to traipse down to London for a potential that might happen, but if someone's local, then you can make it work or tie it all in together. it comes down to, again, sussing out the personality. And I think for me, but putting some time aside to still do the face to face. I still do a lot of face to face networking because that's the way to do it. But again, for us, as where we are in our business, it is getting in front of as many people as we can do. That's the bottom line. The products that we do aren't necessarily I need it now, but it's something maybe people want to have in their office at some point, or the service we have isn't ready for them right now. So you've got to keep there. And I think also going in front of people, you've got a better chance to articulate what you do, especially in our world, with taking samples and things like that. So it's a balance between doing some of that. Some of it has to be online, but there are spaces for getting face to face, and especially if you can pre-qualify a meet. So there's a lot of, is this ready for you now or is it not? Can we pre-qualify it? I don't want to drive halfway across the country to meet someone who might not want anything. So I think it's a balance, and you only get that by really sort of having the conversation, whether that's on LinkedIn, having a phone. And this is why I think, having a chat with someone on the phone, you can get more out of than just the one line or an email. So it is balancing the time.
Yeah, that's it. I think a big issue that a lot of people face when they're starting their business is they just talk to the wrong people.
Yeah.
People without budget who aren't their good ideal fit. The timing isn't right, and it's just addressing that. And then you see the people who flourish and they talk with the right clients, and that's where stuff makes sense. I remember a couple of years ago, I kind of sandwiched it in. I met a client, met a prospect, and went to Old Trafford as well. So that was not a good day at Old Trafford, which isn't a shock anymore with Man United. However, I speaking to a prospect, thought he's saying all the things I want to hear. Went up to Preston, so I detoured, and then he wasn't even in Preston. He was further outside. So he picks me up. His name was ironically Mike as well. He picks me up in his car, talking to me. Really nice old guy. Tells me his plans. I gave him a vision, a strategy. Put a lot of work in, and he basically put me in a room with his CMO. It was like 2 balls, and I think like he was doing it to stir the pot a little bit.
Yeah.
So he left. He's like, "I'll let you talk." I was like, "I know what he's done here. It's a bit of a setup." I thought the work of this CMO really wasn't good. I thought it was massively subpar.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Mike this in like a very professional, political way. I was like, "I just think you're being massively underserved." He obviously passed it on to him. And I don't know, it was a bit of a back and forth, and a bit of me was like, what am I doing here? In the end, we were there. Nothing ever happened from that.
Yeah.
That's where you really need to get stuff that's a bit more concrete set in, as opposed to
100%.
You really need to set the agenda here. I've come to your office.
Yeah.
I've the team. It's like, for what? What was the purpose of this?
Yeah, I mean, years ago I've done something. I think I drove down south for a meeting, thinking that in my head it was a done deal, and actually it wasn't. It was nowhere near. And so you kind of learn a little bit that actually you're looking for the buying signs, but you do have to spend the time researching these people. And the challenge is when you're running the business on your own is, how do I fit all this time, as you say, how do you fit all this time in to do it, and as well do some of the stuff, because then you end up not doing the stuff you've set out in the business to do in the first place, because you're busy doing the marketing, you're doing the sales, you're doing the finance, you're doing everything else, you're on LinkedIn, you're doing whatever you need to do, and you're not actually doing the stuff that you want to do, which can be a challenge. But I think it's a bit like, I suppose, going back to the bodybuilding scenario, it's prioritizing things and making time to do it. The challenge I have, and Nikki, who works with me, we're both disabled, we're creative people, so your brain's, your structure for doing things structured is a little bit, some people sometimes come and say, oh, look, there's a fluffy thing, or there's something shiny up there, let's go and do that instead. And you've got to kind of be really quite strong. It's a bit like death by ding on your inbox, isn't it? When you're working away and ding, something, all right, I'll have a look at that. And you've got to get out of that mindset and just get onto focus and put set time aside to do LinkedIn or do the prospecting, or try and put a day aside. And I've started doing as well, putting calendar links out to people. So if actually they really want to bother talking to me, they can do, rather than me trying to work out when's the best time. So you just learn little things as you go along to maximize your time. but try and, yeah, for us, part of it is trying to look for people as well in our network and partnering with people who could recommend us.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, if we can add value to someone else's proposition, then that's another way so we've got a few partners on the website who we can do work with, or they could recommend us. So actually that they can start doing some of the selling for you. So I think if you get quite smart about who you want to partner with, or people who you can add value to your service, then suddenly you've got another source of people who can refer you in.
Yeah, strategic partnerships, ambassadors,
Yeah.
relationships. That's
Yeah, absolutely.
massively underserved. So
So yeah.
Mike, what's the plan? What's the big vision for the next year? Have you got it mapped out?
Yeah, well, it kind of changed over the last 2 weeks, to be fair.
Okay.
Which is once we started. So the idea is we will talk to clients and do the bespoke art and however, and do all those kind of things. But more recently, we've been asked to look at workshops. So something that might have been on the board 6 months ago, it was kind of there that we could perhaps do something around the well-being space and actually engaging. But then 3 opportunities have come up. One for working on a one-to-one, one for working with we're actually working with a cancer charity tomorrow. Actually, we're doing a workshop for them. But then actually a business who want us to go in and work with their team to produce the art for their own walls. So suddenly, our vision is going to be now to try and grow the workshops, because it could be something that could be pretty cool, and actually there's a tangible benefit there to your team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the idea, is to get our focus will be now to get obviously more of the bespoke work in, but at the same time look to grow how we can get more of the workshops going.
Makes sense.
That's what we want to do, because it could be a thing that actually the more people we talk to is actually going, yeah, that's actually quite cool. That's something a little bit different. I've also got a good contact of mine who does the same thing, but with music. So suddenly you've got an offering where actually we could tag onto the back of them as well, because she wants to get into businesses. So actually, why not offer art and offer music? I also have a contact who's got a training business in the medical sector, and they've offered to look at how we could potentially do a pilot with them as well. So there's a few things that kind of suddenly got quite exciting, that we think actually, yeah, we can do this. We can give it a go. So yeah, that's the vision at the minute.
There we go. It's various skills within the business that can help grow the business. That initially, when you start the business, you don't think, oh, we're going to go do this. It's we're going to be here,
no,
create. But no, it's the canvas is yours to be created.
Absolutely, yeah, and get messy with paint. So that's exactly it, and have some fun. That's the idea.
Mike, where can people find you?
They can find us on LinkedIn under MJH Art Studio, or my name, Mike Hall, on there, but also on our website, which is mjhartstudio.com. Contact details are on there. More than happy to chat to anybody, or if they want to know any more about bodybuilding, I can tell them anything. But yeah, all my details are on there, and there's sort of samples of stuff that we've done. And there's some video. We've got a YouTube channel as well. We've got a lot of behind the scenes videos of how we've created the pieces. I think the piece that you and I talked about when I shared with you some of the big pieces we've done, you can see how we did all those behind the scenes. So there's all sorts of good stuff that we do.
Very cool. I look forward to seeing it, Mike. Mike, thank you for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Joe. Thanks ever so much.